Okay, so it looks like we have some Chinese retaliation. It's targeted against Canada, and this stems from the Huawei CFO being detained in Canada. Right now, from what we understand, her lawyers are trying to get her released on bail, and you can speak to how they're trying to work out her release. But as you mentioned during one of our live shows and a video that we did on this very subject, you did mention that China would be targeting Canada first before they even started to address the U.S. factor in this really bizarre story that has unfolded. But what is happening now in China with the detainment of a Canadian ambassador, a former Canadian ambassador? Is this really retaliation against the Huawei CFO being arrested?
I think it's very difficult to say that it's not. Now, I should say I don't know whether this man is an ambassador, but he was a very senior Canadian diplomat.
Yes. A senior, my mistake. A senior Canadian diplomat, Michael Kovrig. Yes,
Kovrig. Yeah, I mean, he arranged. He was one of the team that arranged Justin Trudeau, that's the Canadian Prime Minister's trip to China, and he's a member of the International Crisis Group, which is a pretty high-powered organization, and he's been arrested on some unspecified charge. This comes the day after the Chinese Foreign Ministry talks about serious consequences for Canada as a result of what happened to the chief financial officer of Huawei, and I think that most people think that it's connected. I mean, I have no doubt it is connected. Justin Trudeau has now issued a statement saying he's very concerned about this, and some people in Canada are now finally picking up on the depth of Chinese anger over this issue. And when I say Chinese anger, I've been following the Chinese media, the English language Chinese media, and it's been striking to see over the course of the last 2 days how articles that are appearing in the Chinese media discussing the arrest of the chief financial officer of Huawei in Canada are getting stronger and stronger almost by the hour. And China has a very, very large intranet community. People go express their opinions. Chinese people express their opinions. I understand that there is great anger within China amongst the Chinese population, amongst the Chinese public, at what they see as an attack on China. Now, it's going beyond the arrest of this Canadian diplomat, this former Canadian diplomat. Serious, very serious though that is, it seems there's now talk about Canadian agricultural exports to China also being targeted also. And that is something that the Canadians are becoming increasingly concerned about and are very, very worried about. But it is very difficult to see how they can now get off this extraordinary situation that they've maneuvered themselves into without enraging the United States if they let this Mrs. Meng, the Huawei executive, go. So Canada has got itself in a very bad place, as people say in Britain, up the creek without a paddle.
Right, in a rock in a hard place. What exactly, can you explain to our viewers, what exactly are they holding Miss Wang for? The Canadian side, forget about the U.S., she violated sanctions. Why is Canada detaining her?
It seems to be entirely based on extradition proceedings from the U.S. There's still great uncertainty about the nature of the charges the U.S. is bringing. On our live show on Sunday, our colleague Mark Sloboda said that she's been charged by the U.S. in connection with violations of sanctions that were imposed on Iran some 8 or 10 years ago. But, it's still very unclear what's happening. Now, the legal maneuvers that are underway in Canada at the moment are to have her released from detention. Mrs. Meng is currently in detention in Canada, whilst the United States and Canada debate her extradition. That process could take months. That's to say, the extradition proceedings, they could take months or even years. The Chinese want to get her out of detention, at least for that period, even if she's not formally allowed to leave Canada. Incomprehensibly, and I think this is going to add fuel to the fire, the Canadians are resisting this. They are saying that she is a flight risk, that if she leaves detention, she will get on a plane and fly out of Canada, presumably back to China. Not easy to see how that could actually happen. They talk about the fact that she has several passports. Well, many business people have several passports. The Chinese have pointed out that she actually has a property in Canada, apparently a big apartment in Vancouver. And, of course, members of her family have come forward and have said that they're prepared to stand as sureties for her in case she were to flee. But, I mean, to my mind, the idea of Mrs. Meng, such a well-known and prominent person, escaping from Canada in this kind of situation is bizarre. It is bizarre that she's not being allowed bail or hasn't been allowed bail yet. The refusing her bail in this kind of situation, when, as I said, she's not being charged with anything specific in Canada itself, but this is all an extradition case that could take, as I said, months or even years. Treating her in this way is going to inflame opinion in China even further. And I'm afraid any Canadian diplomat or Canadian business person in China at this moment needs to be very careful, because, as I said, I could see this thing getting more and more dangerous as Chinese escalation and Chinese retaliation continues to build.
So she potentially could be living in Canada short term until there's a trial for her extradition to the U.S. Is that what we're dealing with right now? She's not being charged in Canada. This is all about her being extradited to the United States. Has that been confirmed that she will be extradited, or is that being fought?
No, I mean, it is being fought. I mean, the point is that extradition is a legal process. So the Canadian courts have to decide whether there is a valid extradition request in the United States. Most people, I'm going to be straightforward about this, most people think this is, if not quite a formality, almost a formality. No one believes that Canada, having gone this far by arresting her and detaining her in the way that it has, would actually refuse an extradition request from the United States through the court process. I was reading a very interesting article in the Chinese media in which the Chinese essentially said as much. And so that what Canada now needs to do is to make some good political decisions, put aside the judicial aspects, and consider its own relationship with China, which is deteriorating fast.
How did Trudeau get into this mess? Because Trudeau knew about this, Bolton knew about this. We still haven't had confirmation that Trump knew about this. We're hearing that he didn't. Mm-hmm. So we have Bolton on one side, and we've talked about Bolton at great lengths, and how hawkish he is, and his disdain for China. Disdain for any competitor, actually. I guess you could say that about Bolton to the United States. And then we have Trudeau, who knew about this. How did Trudeau maneuver himself in such a difficult position?
I mean, can I just mention Trump? I'm pretty sure he did not know about this. I mean, Trump is many things. I don't believe that he would have sat in a negotiation with the president of China and kept this thing secret if he'd actually known about it. I mean, that just isn't the character of the man. Bolton obviously did know about it. What Justin Trudeau thought he was doing, I simply do not know. But Justin Trudeau has liked to play very much over the last couple of years, since he became Prime Minister, the part of the great champion of human rights around the world, and of course the champion of human rights in countries like China and Russia. So he's already said all sorts of critical things about China. He probably wants to improve relations with the United States, with which he personally has had a very fraught relationship with Donald Trump, as we've discussed on previous programs. He probably thought that this is a good way of showing to the Chinese that Canada is a strong country. It won't be pushed around. It will take human rights and international law, as he would say it, seriously. And at the same time, he would improve relations with the United States. The Chinese have interpreted this as in a completely different way. They're talking about Canada becoming the US's glove puppet. Apparently, that's going down very badly with some people in Canada also, who are becoming concerned at the strength of the Chinese reaction. And, of course, it's not compatible with international law. I saw an article in Bloomberg which also referred to it as a kidnapping, which is what I described it as on our previous programs.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's a much better way for Trudeau to channel his virtue signaling addiction that he has, other than kidnapping an executive for such a powerful and high profile company. Well, what does this have to do with human rights?
I love your word, virtue signaling, because this isn't something that Trudeau ever seems to be able to resist. And it's got nothing to do with human rights. I mean, Huawei is, as you correctly said, one of the most powerful companies in the world, one of the world's biggest companies, a major technology company, a company that is seen in the United States as a potential rival to its own technology companies. And everybody knows that that is the real backstory behind this affair. It's got nothing to do with human rights. Trudeau was completely wrong to get Canada into a fight between the US and China over technology issues. It does not concern Canada. Canada should have stayed right out of it. And if the US came along to him and said, we want this person arrested and sent to China for because we want to bring charges against her, Trudeau should have said to them, look, this person has committed no crimes in Canada. We're not interested. If you've got an issue with China, you should pursue it yourselves and not try to involve Canada in it. But he didn't do that. He never seems to have the judgment to handle these things well, and he's now got Canada in a very tight spot.
Do you think this is going to escalate further, or will they find a way to diffuse this situation going forward? I don't see how it can de-escalate, but is there a way it can de-escalate?
I don't think it will de-escalate. And I'm going to say what I think. I think that the Canadians will go through with this thing. I think that having enraged the Chinese, they're not now going to enrage the US by letting Mrs. Meng go. So I'm afraid Mrs. Meng will probably go to the United States. She will probably be put on trial there. She will be probably sent to prison there. That will create a massive anger in China towards both the US and Canada. And I'm afraid we will see Canada suffering more and more retaliation from China, and the United States, which is, of course, in a completely different league from Canada in terms of its economic power, also finding itself increasingly locked in a trade war with China, a very patriotic country. Chinese people are very patriotic, and they will demand that China hits back. So, as I said, you will see escalating trade wars, escalating confrontation between China and the United States, escalating retaliation by China against Canada, and I'm afraid the new Cold War between China and the United States that people were talking about, that Vice President Pence was threatening at the G20 summit in Singapore, that has been taken a huge, big further step forward.
All part of the plan. To me, I don't know. This whole thing
it is.
Seems like it's just all part of the plan, and Bolton is kind of sitting in the corner, grinning, rubbing his hands together, grinning and saying, look at how I'm pulling the strings of the geopolitical, conflicts that he's wanted to push forward. China,
Absolutely.
Iran, Russia.
And let's say two things. First of all, I mean, Bolton, whatever else he is, I mean, he's got a plan. I mean, I happen to think it's an extremely bad plan, but he's got a plan, and he's acting on his plan, and he's acting on that plan with a certain degree of cleverness. What plan does Trudeau have? I mean, it seems to me this was an act of total idiocy. I mean, playing along with John Bolton's ambitions to square off against China and to involve Canada in that quarrel seems to me to be utterly stupid. But, I can't find any other words to describe it. And I think people in Canada should start thinking about this and really start thinking about whether they really want a prime minister who involves Canada in these kind of conflicts. Now, as for Bolton's plan, yes, he does want to square up against every rival of the United States. He is an America First nationalist on steroids. The risk that he's running is he's going to end up pitching the United States in quarrels with everybody. And this is not the 1990s anymore. It's not even the early 2000s when he was involved in the George W. Bush administration. China is a much more powerful country. It's in alliance with Russia. That alliance is going to get even stronger. The Chinese, as I said, when I was in China in 2017, they were saying to me, we understand, a lot of what the Russians are saying about the U.S., but we are much cleverer. We know how to handle the U.S. much better, and now they've been disabused of that. They see that there is no good way to handle the U.S. and that the U.S. is coming up against them. And any idea that American people have that China is not able to develop its own technologies. I was reading an article somewhere that the Chinese might have problems replicating the U.S. production of chips. Might not be able to do chips of the sophistication that the United States does. Any idea that China, which is today a technological superpower, cannot do that is just fanciful. So you're making an enemy of China, you're antagonizing the Chinese people, you've already made an enemy of Russia, you're going to find yourself with quarrels with all sorts of people. It's a bad plan. At least John Bolton is got his plan, and as I said, we know what his views are. Why is Justin Trudeau involving Canada in it? I cannot see.
Yeah, it's just a boy playing way out of his league here.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, Canada, by the way, which, if I can say something about Canada, Canada has a long tradition of diplomacy.
I was just about to say
the Canadians used to excel at this.
Yeah.
I mean, they were one of the great countries in brokering deals between countries. It was Canada, for example, that I think I'm right in saying this, pioneered the whole idea of UN peacekeeping forces back in the 50s at the time of the Suez Crisis. So, I mean, to see a country like Canada mismanaging its affairs so badly is very, very sad. It's very disappointing to me. And to see a prime minister like Justin Trudeau, when I remember the extraordinary ability of his father, Pierre Trudeau, who, whatever else he was a consummate diplomat. I mean, that is also extremely sad. And I hope and believe that there are people in Canada who understand this.
Yeah, this whole thing is very unlike Canada to get involved in this. It's unlike them.
Well, the Canada that you and I, Alex, used to know.
Yeah.
I mean, and I hope the Canada that at some level is still there.
Yeah. All right. We'll be following this story as it develops. We don't have much to talk about as far as actual charges and what's really going on behind the scenes. I guess all we could do, Alexander, is just, analyze the situation and make a lot of assumptions here. But there's really not many facts that have been given to us about why they're holding her, what's the reasons behind it, and where this thing's heading to.
Which is, of course, an ominous fact in itself.
Yeah.
If there were straightforward charges against her, we would have heard about them by now.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Alexander Mercouris, Editor-in-Chief of the Duran. Thank you very much. Guys, if you like this video, click on the subscribe button down below and click on the notifications bell to get notifications every time we push out a new video. And visit the Duran shop, buy a t-shirt, 20% off throughout the whole month of December. And in the description box, you'll find links to our PayPal and Patreon page. Please donate to the Duran. It really helps us out a lot. And of course, you can get this very show on podcast format in iTunes and on Soundcloud. Alexander Mercouris, Editor-in-Chief of the Duran. Thank you once again. Till next time, everybody. Take care.